Welcome, listeners. I'm Silas, your sleepy storyteller, pulling you down the rabbit hole of time, where dreams and memories intertwine. If you enjoy these videos, please tap the like button. It really helps. Also, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can keep drifting along on your sleepy journey through history. And before we wander down the rabbit hole, share your city and time in the comments. I love imagining our journey threading through every ticking clock. Now, take a moment to find a comfortable resting position. Close your eyes gently, and in your own time, allow yourself to sink into the quiet atmosphere of the past as we begin our slow journey together. Tonight, our walk takes us into the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans, Louisiana. The year is 2005, and Hurricane Katrina is beginning to announce her arrival. The sky above is swollen, thick with dark clouds roiling in unnatural hues, grays, greens, and bruised purples shifting restlessly, as though the heavens themselves cannot keep still. Thunder rolls in the distance, low and menacing, like some ancient beast stirring in its sleep. The air is damp and heavy, clinging to my skin like a wet cloth, filled with the sharp tang of brine, mud, and rain-soaked asphalt. The first drops strike my face like cold needles, streaking across my cheeks and plastering my hair to my forehead. The jacket around my shoulders quickly grows heavy, sodden with water, and every movement feels slower, as though the storm is already pulling me down into its gravity. I can feel the storm's rhythm inside me. Each flash of lightning thrums in my chest. Each crack of thunder rattles my ribs, vibrating through bone and breath. The storm isn't just around me. It's inside me, alive, watching, warning me to tread carefully, to respect the weight of the moment. As I step deeper into the lower Ninth Ward, my boots splash in shallow pools, forming on the uneven asphalt. The water is dark, rippling with oil sheens that shimmer faintly whenever lightning splits the sky. Ahead, rising steadfast against the wind and rain, stands Holy Cross High School, a historic Catholic institution that has long been a cornerstone of this neighborhood. Founded in 1849, its red brick facade is weathered but unbowed, the kind of structure that seems eternal. Built not only to educate, but to root itself in the life of the community. Its tall windows are dark now, blank eyes staring into the storm, and the silence pressing against its walls feels heavier than the thunder above. I pause at the wrought iron gates, their surface slick with rain. My fingers curl around the cool metal, and I imagine all the young hands that have gripped these same bars over the decades, students joking with friends, waiting for parents, gathering before heading home. I can almost hear their echoes, the laughter bouncing across the yard, the shuffle of textbooks under arms, the shuffle of basketball shoes on pavement after practice. But tonight, there is no laughter. No footsteps. Only rain pelting against stone. Only thunder muttering across the heavens. Only silence growing where noise should be. I close my eyes for a moment and think of what is coming. How the waters will rise. How the levees will fail. How these very halls will be swallowed by the flood. Classrooms will be drowned, hallways stripped bare, and a century of memory will be left sodden, scattered, and broken. And yet, The soul of Holy Cross is not just in its bricks and mortar. It is in the students who walked here, the teachers who gave their lives to shaping the young, the families who trusted this place to prepare their children for the world. That spirit will not drown. It will move, relocate, rebuild, as surely as this city has always found ways to rebuild. The lower Ninth Ward knows loss better than most. And yet, it also knows resilience. This was a neighborhood of working people, of families rooted deeply in their homes, often for generations. Many here were not wealthy, but their wealth lay in something else: community, tradition, and pride. This was a place where neighbors knew one another, where children played in the streets, where music drifted out of open windows on summer nights. When Katrina came, it was not only the water that broke through the levees, but also the fragile sense of security people had in their homes. Houses that had stood for decades were swept from foundations. Whole blocks were erased in minutes. Families found themselves scattered, some stranded on rooftops, some forced into the Superdome, others driven hundreds of miles from the city they loved. The lower Ninth suffered the most devastating blow. Nearly every home was destroyed, nearly every family displaced. Some would never return. Others would try to rebuild and find only bureaucracy and heartbreak waiting for them. And yet, amid the destruction, something unyielding remained. The spirit of this community, battered but alive. The people of the Ninth Ward carried their resilience like a lantern in the flood. They grieved, they protested, they demanded recognition. And many returned, brick by brick, beam by beam, to reclaim what was taken from them. The rain lashes harder now, streaming down my face, seeping into every seam of my clothes. The trees along Dauphine Street bend and sway, their branches clawing at the storm. Lightning flashes, casting the schoolyard in stark white for the briefest instant, ghostly, hollow, like a photograph from another time. I take a step back from the gate and look up at the looming facade of Holy Cross. The building seems to breathe in the storm, to resist it in its own way. The weight of history presses down here: Catholic tradition, community roots, the pride of generations. For a moment, I feel as if the building itself is alive, whispering to me through the hiss of rain. We have endured before. We will endure again. The Ninth Ward has always stood on fragile ground, both literally and metaphorically. A neighborhood born in the shadow of levees and waterways, tied to the rhythms of the Mississippi. It has always carried vulnerability in its bones. But vulnerability is not weakness. It is awareness. It is survival. It is knowing how to bend when you cannot break. I take one last look at the school, its windows reflecting flashes of stormlight, and I feel a strange mix of grief and hope. Katrina will take much from this place: lives, homes, history carved into wood and stone. But she cannot erase the soul of the Ninth Ward. The people here are rooted too deeply, their music too strong, their faith too stubborn, their love for one another too enduring to be washed away. The storm presses harder, the wind tugging at my jacket, the water rising against my boots. The air hums with electricity, each gust of wind carrying the taste of salt and rain and earth torn up from its foundations. And so, with the storm at my back and the echoes of Holy Cross in my heart, I step away from the gates and move onward into the Ninth Ward. where more stories wait to be uncovered, where the resilience of this place will reveal itself again and again, even in the darkest hours. The streets grow narrower as I press on, and the water begins to deepen, swirling higher around my legs. What was once a sidewalk is now a shallow river, tugging at my steps with every uncertain stride. My hair is plastered against my face, raindrops sliding down into my mouth, the taste of salt and grit lingering on my tongue. My jacket clings to me like a second skin, heavy, sodden, and unrelenting. The wind sharpens, stealing my breath as I try to draw it in. It whistles through the skeletal remains of trees and rattles against telephone wires, making them hum like ghostly violins strung too tight. Above me, thunder unfurls again, low, long, and furious, vibrating not only through the sky, but through my chest, as though the storm is intent on shaking me from the inside out. And then, through the sheets of rain and the half-light of a broken evening, they appear. The Dullet steamboat houses. Two structures, twins in spirit, if not identical in every detail, rising proudly above the floodwaters. Their frames are fashioned after riverboats, those grand paddle wheelers that once ruled the Mississippi. Curved balconies stretch outward like decks ready to welcome passengers. The railings gleam faintly, slick with rain, and the tiered porches recall the layers of a vessel made for both work and leisure, progress and spectacle. I stop for a long moment, unable to move, unable to look away. They are out of place here, like ships that ran aground long ago and decided never to leave. Their very design whispers of a past when New Orleans was inseparable from its waterways, when commerce, music, and human lives all traveled along the current of the Mississippi. I wade closer, my boots disappearing beneath the water, until I can place a hand against the wet wood of one balcony post. It trembles faintly, not from weakness, but from the vibration of thunder as it tears across the sky. The rain pounds against the roof and drips in rivulets down the ornate woodwork. The houses groan softly as if reminding the storm. I have been here for a century, and I will not bow to you now. The Dullet houses were built in the early 1900s by riverboat pilots. Men who knew these waters better than anyone. They carved their homes in the likeness of the vessels that defined their lives, bringing the river's spirit onto land. These were not ordinary homes. They were symbols, testaments to ingenuity, to pride, to identity. Their decks once held children leaning over the railings, pretending to be passengers, setting off to distant ports. Their porches once rang with the sound of jazz drifting down the block, carried by the humid night air. And now, they stand in a drowned neighborhood, their reflections broken across the rising flood. I trace the outlines with my eyes and try to imagine the families who lived here, their ancestors shaping their lives in rhythm with the water. The Mississippi gave life, yes, but it also took. Flooding was no stranger to the lower ninth. Residents grew up with the knowledge that the levees were both protector and potential betrayer. The Dullet houses embody that fragile balance. Built high, built proud, built to endure, but never truly safe from the whims of the river or the storms born from the Gulf. The rain beats harder now, sheets of water slamming sideways, stinging my cheeks like handfuls of gravel. I hunch into it, my body small against the immensity of the storm. Yet even in this relentless assault, I feel something unexpected, a strange calm. The Dalit houses are here, and their survival whispers something profound, that history can endure even in the face of destruction. Still, my mind cannot help but drift to the people of this ward. Katrina was more than a storm to them. It was a force that ripped apart not only houses and streets, but families, memories, and entire ways of life. Many residents lost everything. Photographs that told their family stories, heirlooms passed from one generation to the next, the very places where childhood laughter once rang out. And yet, despite that devastation, there is resilience. I can feel it lingering here, in the bones of these riverboat homes. The Ninth Ward's people have always been fighters. They rebuilt after floods before. They endured decades of neglect, redlining, poverty, and broken promises. They created a culture that thrived regardless. Music that shook the foundations of jazz. Parades that turned grief into celebration. Food that carried the taste of ancestry and survival. I imagine a family huddled inside one of these houses during Katrina's first hours. The wind howling outside, the sound of shutters tearing loose, glass breaking, water slapping harder and harder at the foundations. Children crying, elders whispering prayers, and a matriarch, perhaps steadying her voice to remind them that they have faced hardship before, that they come from a line of people who endured worse and lived to tell their stories, that they too would endure. Because resilience in the Ninth Ward was not optional. It was necessity. I let the water swirl higher around my boots, soaking through until my socks cling cold and heavy. The air is thick with the scent of wet wood and mud, undercut by the faint chemical tang of something unnatural, perhaps fuel carried along the flood. Every sense is heightened, as though the storm has stripped away all distractions, leaving only raw sensation. The Dalit houses loom above me, their decks eerily empty. They look like riverboats moored in a sea without end, waiting for passengers who will never arrive. I can almost hear the ghostly echo of a paddle wheel churning, the faint laughter of travelers long gone. But beneath it all, there is silence, a silence not of peace, but of absence. That silence is what Katrina left behind. Streets once filled with neighbors calling to each other across porches now emptied. Children who once skipped along sidewalks now scattered, displaced to Texas, Georgia, Arkansas, anywhere that would take them. Churches where hymns rose each Sunday morning now waterlogged, hymnals floating like driftwood in abandoned pews. The Ninth Ward was not simply flooded, it was fractured. Torn apart not only by water, but by policies and politics that decided who returned and who did not. Many never came back. And yet, for those who did, resilience was not just about rebuilding houses. It was about rebuilding identity. I feel that weight here, in the Dalit steamboat houses. They stand as if to remind me, this is more than wood and nails. This is memory. This is resistance. The rain lashes harder, driven by sudden gusts that force me to brace against a nearby lamppost. My body shakes, though whether from cold or awe, I cannot tell. The The storm feels endless, but in the presence of these homes, I sense continuity. They endured 1909, 1927, Betsy in 1965, and now Katrina in 2005. They lean, perhaps, but they do not fall. And neither do the people of this neighborhood. I close my eyes briefly, letting the rain stream over my face, washing me clean in its relentless torrent. In that moment, I imagine the future, the long, painful years after the storm, the rebuilding efforts, the community meetings where neighbors argued, cried, and prayed, the way brass bands returned first to funerals, then to parades, turning mourning into motion, the way artists painted murals across ruined walls, proclaiming that beauty still lived here, that culture could not be drowned. Resilience is not romantic. It is not easy. It is born of necessity, of survival when no one else will help. And the Ninth Ward's resilience was forged in water, fire, and grief. The Dalit houses embody that truth. They are not merely quaint relics of architectural whimsy. They are stubborn acts of endurance, clinging to life in a city and a ward that refused to disappear. The water presses harder against my legs now, swirling with debris, sticks, leaves, even a child's toy drifting past me. I step carefully, each movement a reminder of fragility. Yet as I pass the Dalit houses, I feel strengthened. Their decks rise above me, empty yet unbowed, like ships still waiting for a crew that will return one day. The storm roars on. The wind seizes at my jacket, flinging water into my eyes. But I walk on, carrying with me the spirit of these houses and the resilience of the people who have called them neighbors for over a century. Because even amid destruction, even amid absence, some things endure. The Dalit houses stand, and through them, the spirit of the Ninth Ward continues, anchored by history, lifted by resilience, defiant against the flood. The rain intensifies, and my journey becomes something heavier than a walk. It becomes a battle of will against the storm. What was once ankle deep has risen to my knees, the brown water swirling thick around my legs, carrying scraps of wood, plastic bottles, and nameless debris swept from porches and yards. Each step forward is laborious, the current tugging at me as if trying to turn me back, as though the storm itself wishes to keep its secrets. My soaked clothes cling like a second skin, heavy, dripping, weighing me down with each movement. Lightning slashes the sky, its brief illumination casting a ghostly brilliance on the house of dance and feathers. Its painted walls, usually alive with the color of Mardi Gras, look muted now, their reds and blues dulled to shadow by the storm's gray shroud. The doors are sealed, but behind them lies the heartbeat of a culture, costumes of bright feathers and beadwork, drums that have carried rhythm across generations, stories of a people who have always fought to keep their identity alive. I pause, bracing myself against the current as it pushes at my knees. The water sloshes cold against my skin, and the wind whips spray into my eyes. Still, I let my gaze linger on the house of dance and feathers. It is more than a building. It is a sanctuary of memory. For decades, the Mardi Gras Indians of the lower Ninth Ward have gathered here, sewing intricate costumes stitch by stitch, preparing for parades that were never simply celebrations, but declarations of presence. To step into the streets adorned in feathers and beads, to drum and chant while crowds gathered, it was a way of saying, "We are here, we endure, we matter." The storm drowns that sound tonight, smothering drums and silencing voices. Yet, even in silence, I can feel it. The spirit, the defiance. No storm can wash away the traditions etched into memory, the pride carried forward by families who have lived here for generations. The water tugs at me again, forcing me onward. My legs ache with the effort of lifting them through the flood, each step an act of determination. I shiver, though the air is hot and wet, the humidity clinging like a fever. My soaked jacket slaps against my thighs, heavy with rain. The lower Ninth is drowning, but I keep moving. A few blocks away, I come upon Bynum's Pharmacy. Its windows are dark, rain streaking down the glass in crooked rivulets. The sign above the door is battered, the paint peeling, but it still clings stubbornly in place, as though refusing to fall even now. The door is locked, the shelves within already emptied. The storm has stripped the space of light and life, but its memory clings to the air. This was once a hub of community life. Families stopped here not just for medicine, but for conversation, for advice, for a friendly face behind the counter who knew their names. It was a place of trust, of small kindnesses that stitched neighbors together into a community. Parents picking up prescriptions for children might linger to swap news. Elderly residents might pause for a word of encouragement, a reminder that they were not alone. Now, that connection is severed. Katrina has washed it away. The windows stare blankly out at a street that is no longer a street, but a river. The shelves inside stand like ghosts, emptied in haste, perhaps abandoned in panic. I press my hand briefly against the glass, slick with rain, and feel the weight of absence. The lower Ninth Ward was never a wealthy place. Many of its residents lived paycheck to paycheck, working jobs that demanded long hours for modest wages. Yet it was a place of resilience, of rootedness, where families stayed for generations, where neighbors became extensions of one another's families. The devastation of Katrina was not just water tearing through wood and brick. It was the unraveling of those connections, the scattering of people who had lived side by side for decades, the displacement of traditions and identities tied to place. The water swirls higher, lapping at the pharmacy's steps, and I force myself onward. My shoes are heavy, squelching with each movement, the soles scraping against unseen debris hidden beneath the flood. The rain falls harder now, a relentless curtain that blurs the edges of everything. And as I walk, I think of the people. I imagine them in these very streets before the storm. Mothers hanging laundry on lines strung between porches. Children chasing each other barefoot across cracked sidewalks. Elders sitting on stoops, sharing stories of music, faith, and struggle. The lower Ninth was alive with sound and color then. Brass bands practicing on corners. Mardi Gras Indians sewing late into the night. Second-line parades weaving joy through streets lined with shotgun houses. Now, it is drowned in silence, broken only by the roar of wind and the crack of thunder. The storm presses down, erasing those everyday rhythms. Yet I know, deep down, that erasure is temporary. The people of the Ninth Ward have endured crises before: poverty, segregation, neglect by the city's power structures. Each time, they leaned on one another, weaving resilience out of hardship, turning suffering into song, pain into tradition, despair into determination. Katrina will scatter them, yes. It will take homes, churches, schools, and businesses. It will leave empty lots where laughter once lived. But it will not erase the spirit. Even in exile, in Houston, Atlanta, Baton Rouge, the people of the lower ninth will carry their community within them, a heartbeat louder than any storm. Another flash of lightning explodes across the sky, etching the scene in stark relief. The pharmacy, the swirling water, the broken fences, the sagging porches. For a brief moment, everything is frozen in white light, as though captured in a photograph. Then darkness swallows it again, leaving only the sound of rain and my own labored breathing. I struggle forward, the water now swirling higher against my thighs. My muscles ache with the effort, and my breath comes ragged. The storm presses on every side, relentless. Yet I keep walking, because to stop would be to surrender. To the storm, to despair, to silence. And surrender is not what the Ninth Ward has ever done. I pause once more to look back at the house of dance and feathers, its silhouette barely visible now through the sheets of rain. Though silent, it radiates resilience. I imagine future parades, costumes glittering under the sun, drums echoing through rebuilt streets, children watching wide-eyed as feathers brush the air. I imagine neighbors once again filling Bynum's pharmacy, laughing, greeting one another, rebuilding the fabric of community, one small kindness at a time. The storm cannot imagine that, but I can, and I know the people of the lower ninth can too. For even knee-deep in floodwater, even scattered across cities far from home, they will find ways to return, to stitch back together what was broken, to declare once again, we are here, we endure, we matter. The thunder rumbles again, closer now, shaking the air like a drumbeat. The storm presses harder, but within it I hear something else. The faint, steady rhythm of resilience, the heartbeat of a neighborhood that refuses to disappear. And so I walk on, water swirling at my knees, the storm raging, the memory of the Ninth Ward carrying me forward through the flood. The water is climbing higher now, past my knees, lapping at my thighs with each heavy, dragging step. It feels alive, cold, murky, and insistent, pressing against me like a tide determined to sweep me off my path. Every movement takes effort. Every breath feels heavier, as though the storm itself is wrapping its hands around my chest. The rain no longer falls in droplets. It lashes sideways, stinging my face like sharp needles. And still, I press forward. I round a corner, the street vanishing beneath a restless sheet of water that reflects each burst of lightning like shattered glass. The glow illuminates the looming silhouette of Jackson Barracks, its iron gates half drowned, its brick walls braced against the storm. Built in the 1830s, this post has seen generations of soldiers pass through its grounds. Men and women who trained for battle, marched in parades, and swore to defend this city. Tonight, even the strength of its walls feels small compared to the force of Katrina. The grounds are already submerged, the parade field transformed into a lake. I imagine the boots of recruits sloshing through the water if they were here, the cadence of drills swallowed by thunder. But there is no order, no discipline now, only chaos. The water pushes through the gates as though determined to claim even this place of defense. And I think of what the Guard has meant to this community. In times of disaster, they've been the ones to bring order, to rescue, to protect. Yet in Katrina's fury, even they were overwhelmed. For days, people here waited on rooftops, waving for helicopters that took too long to arrive. Families clung to each other as the water rose. The very structures that had once been their safety now transformed into traps. I can feel that same vulnerability pressing against me as the water surges higher around my thighs. The storm has stripped away the illusion of control. It reminds me that nature does not bargain, does not wait. It takes and it tests. I move on, the water tugging at me with each step, and soon the shadow of George Washington Carver High School rises through the storm. Its broad, rectangular frame is partly hidden by sheets of rain, its windows black and hollow. Once, this school was a beacon. Generations of young people in the lower Ninth Ward walked its halls, carrying dreams of higher education, of athletics, of futures brighter than their present circumstances. Carver was more than a school. It was a gathering place, a source of pride, a foundation for identity. The basketball team's victories were community victories. The marching band's rhythms, a heartbeat that pulsed beyond the walls. Parents filled the bleachers, cheering their children with a fierce hope that education might carry them beyond poverty, beyond limitation. Now, the school sits silent. Its classrooms, where chalk once squeaked against blackboards, are dark and abandoned. The water creeps up its steps, threatening to swallow the building whole. I close my eyes and hear the imagined echoes of students, laughter in hallways, the shuffle of feet, the squeak of sneakers against a gym floor. Those echoes are all that remain tonight. And yet, even as I stand here, I cannot help but think of what this storm did to the families who lived around it. The lower Ninth Ward was devastated beyond comprehension. Entire blocks swept away, houses lifted from their foundations and carried into the streets like driftwood. Families displaced across the country, scattered from Houston to Atlanta, to far-off cities where the rhythms of New Orleans could not follow. Some never returned. Others came back to ruins and tried to rebuild with bare hands, with borrowed tools, with the stubborn resilience that has always defined this community. The water tugs harder at my legs, as though it wants me to remember not just the destruction, but the despair. In the weeks after the storm, people spoke of abandonment, the sense that the world had forgotten them. The helicopters arrived too late. The buses to evacuate never came. For too many, the rooftops became both refuge and prison. The Superdome and Convention Center, instead of sanctuaries, turned into nightmares. The lower ninth bore the heaviest weight, and the scars remain even now, years later. But here is the thing. Amid the despair, there was also resistance. People carried each other to safety. Neighbors broke into stores, not out of malice, but to find water for children, medicine for elders, food for families who had gone days without. Mothers shielded their children from both the rain and the rising fear. Fathers waded through filthy floodwater to bring strangers onto rooftops. I feel the weight of that resilience in the air around Carver High. Even as the storm pounds the building, even as water swirls at its foundations, the spirit of those who walk these halls lingers. The school may have been gutted, its doors closed for years, but the pride of Carver's students endures in memory, in community reunions, in the stories passed down. The rain slams against me again, harder now, and the water climbs another inch higher. My thighs burn from lifting my legs against the current. My arms ache from trying to keep balance as debris drifts by. Branches, planks, even the edge of a roof torn free. Each piece is a reminder that whole lives have been ripped apart. I imagine a family's photo album floating just beneath the surface, its pictures blurred and ruined. Birthdays, graduations, Mardi Gras parades, all washed into anonymity by dirty floodwater. And yet, those memories are not lost. They live on in those who carried them, who survived to tell the stories. Standing here, I realize that the lower Ninth Ward is not defined by tragedy alone. It is defined by its refusal to vanish. Yes, Katrina leveled homes and scattered families, but when the waters receded, the heart of this neighborhood still beat. Slowly, painfully, people returned. They rebuilt churches. They reopened corner stores. They replanted gardens in soil still raw from the flood. Musicians picked up horns, and the sound of brass floated once again over battered streets. Children returned to schools, some to new buildings, others to makeshift classrooms, carrying backpacks heavy with more than books, carrying the legacy of endurance. The storm presses on around me, thunder cracking so loud it rattles my bones. The water is higher now, pushing against my waist, and the danger is undeniable. And yet, I feel an odd sense of calm. Because if the people of the Ninth Ward could withstand this, if they could lose everything and still find the courage to come back, then, perhaps even in the midst of destruction, there is always the seed of renewal. I take a deep breath, the air thick with rain and the tang of river water, and turn my gaze one last time to Carver High. Its windows are dark, its halls silent, but its legacy is unbroken. I can almost hear the faint trace of a marching band, distant yet steady, reminding me that history is not only what is lost, but also what survives. The water tugs at me again, relentless, demanding I move forward. I wade on, each step heavy, my body weary, but my spirit carried by the stories of resilience, of survival, of a community that refused to be erased. Katrina brought devastation, yes, but it also revealed the strength of the people who call this place home. And that strength, even drowned in floodwaters will never fade. The storm's fury grows. What was once a restless ripple at my ankles has surged higher, climbing with a force that feels almost alive. The water presses at my hips, cold and insistent, tugging at my every step as I wade through the streets. Fragments of wood, splintered siding, and pieces of lives float past me, bobbing like displaced memories. Each movement forward is a struggle. Every step, a negotiation with the invisible currents threading through this flooded neighborhood. I pause for a moment, letting the rain strike my face in sharp staccato, washing over my thoughts. These streets were never meant to be silent. Once, they pulsed with life. The wail of brass horns, the snap of snares, the steady drum of a second line weaving through corners, wrapping the entire community in rhythm. Conversation spilled over the music, laughter threaded through doorways, voices blending with voices, a living melody binding neighbors together. Music was survival, and here, it was the lifeblood of the lower Ninth Ward, connecting generations, telling stories, and holding the neighborhood together in times of joy and hardship alike. I push forward, passing what remains of small music venues now darkened, their neon signs crooked, glass shattered, doors swollen shut by the storm's relentless rain. I can almost hear the faint echo of the past. A trumpet warming up, a drum beat cutting the air like a heartbeat, a neighbor's laugh carried across the street. The echoes hang, fragile, in the humid air. Ghosts of what was before Katrina's hand began erasing it. The water swirls with a tang that is part river, part storm, metallic, muddy, acrid with chemicals from broken infrastructure. My clothes cling like second skin, drenched and heavy, pulling at me with each movement. The flood pushes higher, pressing past my chest, clawing at my arms. A roof fragment drifts past, bobbing almost mockingly, and a child's toy, dulled by rain, spins slowly in the current. These small items, remnants of homes abandoned in haste, speak louder than any words. They are evidence of a life uprooted, of families forced to flee with nothing but what they could carry, their past swept into oblivion. The devastation is not only physical, it is cultural, spiritual. The lower Ninth Ward is a cradle of resilience. Families pass homes down through generations. Neighbors raise each other's children. Hardship is met with humor, with song, with pride. Katrina didn't just flood houses. She attempted to erase a way of life, a cultural heartbeat that had survived decades of struggle and joy alike. And yet, even as I move through the rising flood, I feel the resistance in the air. Heavy, yes, but unbroken. I imagine families returning, picking through debris, gathering fragments of memory and community, refusing to let the storm define them. The water rises to my chest, lapping at me like a living entity, pressing with relentless insistence. I wade toward a row of buildings that once hosted the social life of the neighborhood. Mardi Gras Indian tribes gathered here, sewing elaborate suits of beads and feathers by hand, each stitch a story of ancestry and defiance. These halls were sacred spaces, where culture wasn't merely preserved. It was lived, shouted, danced, and celebrated. Now, the floodwater creeps inside, climbing staircases, consuming the very floors where voices once rose. It is almost sacrilegious. The silence where there should be song. And yet, even in the stillness, I sense the promise of resurrection. Music and voices will rise again, stitched into new feathers, drums, and streets. Katrina may have broken walls, but it cannot silence heritage. The wind howls through broken corridors, rattling shards of glass and bent tin. Lightning rips the sky open, illuminating the streets for a fleeting second. And there, looming ahead, is the industrial canal levee, the silent guardian turned betrayer. Its presence is imposing even from a distance, its concrete walls rising above the storm water like a jagged scar. The breach would come here, where engineering and trust failed the people who called this neighborhood home. The flood wall was overtopped, undermined by seeping water, weakened by design flaws. Sheet pilings, too shallow, allowed pressure to build beneath the wall until the levee heaved, giving way with a roar that swallowed streets and homes alike. This is where the water would surge with merciless speed, carrying away houses, possessions, and, with them, pieces of countless lives. I stand for a moment, chest deep in water, and imagine the devastation. Whole blocks unmoored, houses stripped to their frames, memories turned to debris. The streets would be lined with the remnants of what generations had built. Family furniture, photographs, heirlooms, toys, and treasured objects now indistinguishable in the churning flood. Gardens, yards, and familiar porches would vanish beneath a moving lake of ruin. Even the music halls, once alive with culture, would be filled with water instead of rhythm, silence instead of song. The human cost is almost unimaginable. The lower Ninth Ward would not merely suffer property loss, it would lose a measure of its very essence, its continuity, its sense of place. The sound of water racing through the breach grows louder in my mind than the storm around me. I hear the imagined roar of homes ripped from foundations, of cars overturned like toys, of debris smashing against anything in its path. I imagine neighbors shouting to one another, families clinging together, children terrified, the elderly trying to find footing amid the rising chaos. The flood doesn't care for human planning or history. It only knows relentless momentum. As I move forward, wading deeper into the water, I reflect on what the residents lost. They lost homes built and repaired over decades, furniture crafted with care, kitchens where generations shared meals. They lost street corners where children played freely, corners where music lessons happened, where elders told stories on porches. They lost the intangible, a sense of safety, the continuity of community, the rhythm of ordinary life. Katrina carried all of it away in an instant, leaving emptiness where vibrancy had once lived. And yet, despite this, the spirit of the lower Ninth Ward persists, a stubborn pulse beneath the debris, a defiance in the face of erasure. The current tugs at me harder, water surging around me with urgent insistence. Lightning flashes again, illuminating the levee and the streets, a stark tableau of destruction and resilience. The flood wall may fail, but the people here have not. They are tied to this land, to each other, and to the culture that refuses to be drowned. I think of those who will return, who will sift through rubble, reclaim what they can, rebuild, and teach the next generation the songs, the rhythms, and the stories of this neighborhood. The water reaches my shoulders now. I take a breath, letting the metallic, muddy tang fill my senses. The storm rages, and the industrial canal's failure has reshaped everything in its path. But in this chaos, I feel the quiet heartbeat of resilience, the determination of a community that refuses to vanish. Even amid devastation, even when the levee breaks, even when homes and streets are carried away, the lower Ninth Ward will endure. Music will return. Laughter will return. Life will return. I take a final, deliberate step, wading through the chest-deep water, and let the storm wash over me. The destruction is immense, but the spirit beneath it, the culture, the music, the resilience of generations remains. It is a force no flood can drown. The water presses around me, relentless, yet it cannot press down the determination of a people who have survived far too much to be erased by one storm. The final leg of my walk brings me to McDonough 19 Elementary School, its brick frame rising out of the floodwaters like a half-submerged memory. It is more than just a building. It is a landmark of courage and civil rights. In 1960, 3 little girls, known as the McDonough Three, walked through its doors under the watch of federal marshals, becoming some of the first black children to integrate New Orleans public schools. Their bravery reverberates even now, decades later, a reminder of how resilience takes root in this city. But tonight, the school stands silent. The water presses hard against its walls. Rain lashes the roof, streaming down in sheets. I push forward, wading chest deep now, the storm tugging at me from all sides. The wind bites at my face, and every step feels like a negotiation with the current. My legs strain against the pull of the flood, each motion slowed by the relentless water that threatens to claim me entirely. The smell of wet wood and mud fills my nose, mingling with the sharp tang of river water. My clothes are heavy, each soaked thread dragging me down as if the storm itself is intent on holding me here. My arms slice through the water with effort, each stroke a fight to stay upright. Thunder explodes overhead, booming so loud it vibrates in my chest, reverberating through every bone. Lightning flashes, illuminating the school's windows in stark, fleeting relief. A frozen image of resilience amid the chaos. I pause for a moment, chest heaving, and think of the McDonough Three walking bravely into classrooms filled with hostility, holding their heads high despite the weight of fear. I realize then that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it is measured in small steps forward, in perseverance, when every instinct urges retreat. I inhale and press on. The water is now at my chin. Panic flares as I feel it surge and swirl with debris, branches, fragments of roofing, and even the ghostly shape of a child's plastic tricycle bobbing past me. My boots no longer touch the ground. I am swimming more than walking, each breath deliberate, each stroke a negotiation with survival itself. I cannot help but think of the residents of the lower Ninth Ward, men, women, children, trapped in this nightmare, not as part of a story, but as their reality. When the industrial canal levee gave way, The water came with a sudden, merciless force. Families scrambled desperately. Some clambered into attics, seeking safety, only to find themselves in spaces designed for storage, not survival. Airless, cramped, with walls that could not protect them, attics became deadly traps as the water crept upward, seizing every moment of breath. Others smashed through ceilings with whatever tools they could find: axes, crowbars, even bare hands, splintered wood, cutting their palms as desperation fueled their strikes. Fathers hoisted children, mothers clutched infants, all climbing toward the uncertain promise of air above the waterline. I imagined the brother who kicked open a hole in the roof, hauling his family out into the storm, the wind whipping their soaked hair and clothes. Survival here was measured in inches and seconds, and not everyone made it. Many reached rooftops, scrawling messages for rescue: help, water, baby inside. They waved clothing and sheets, hoping for the sight of a boat, a hand, a helicopter to lift them from despair. Some were saved, some weren't. The water showed no mercy. I gasp as another wave slaps across my face. The flood is now at my lips. My arms flail, moving in desperation as I try to push forward, my body screaming with exertion. The storm seems endless, a living entity intent on testing every ounce of my resolve. Shadows flash in the lightning, rooftops, doors, the skeletal remains of houses swallowed by water. I am acutely aware of how quickly chaos rises and how helpless one can feel against it. Then, a sound over the storm. A small, sturdy boat, its motor whining against the current, pushes toward me. At the bow stands a man, rain plastering his hair to his forehead, eyes bright with determination. He gestures, calling out over the thunder, "Grab on!" With every bit of strength I have left, I reach upward. His hand closes around mine, firm and steady, unyielding. He hauls me into the boat's slick, wet bottom. I collapse, coughing, drenched, my chest heaving. The boat rocks, but it holds, cutting through debris-laden waters, carrying me away from S1.E15 and the chaos behind it. Relief surges through me, but my mind remains with the people still trapped in this flood. I look at my rescuer, one of countless unsung heroes, the neighbors, friends, strangers who would risk everything to save lives. They would later be called the Cajun Navy. Ordinary citizens, propelled into extraordinary acts by sheer heart and courage. They navigated the debris-strewn streets, pulling families, pets, elders from rooftops and trees. Their small boats defying the terror around them. These heroes remind me that even in devastation, human bravery persists. As we glide along, I picture families clinging to rooftops, children clutching soaked toys, parents waving frantically, hearts full of hope and fear. Some of these people would be rescued, others would not. The enormity of loss in the lower Ninth Ward weighs on me. Entire blocks vanished. Homes that held generations reduced to splinters, lives uprooted with little warning. And yet, amid the destruction, there is resilience. Music endures. Stories are told. Neighborhoods rebuild. Culture survives. I cast one last glance at S1.E15, its outline shrinking into the distance, half submerged, a silent witness, to both history and catastrophe. I think of the children who first walked through its doors in courage, of families who fought to survive Katrina's relentless waters, of the rescuers who risked their lives for others, and of every individual who refused to let despair define them. The boat hums steadily beneath me, carrying us onward. The rain pounds, the wind howls, the water churns, but inside, I feel a quiet sense of connection to the people, the city, the history, and the spirit of survival that no storm can extinguish. The lower Ninth Ward may have been battered, but its heart, its music, its soul is unbroken. And as the boat drifts further from the floodwaters, I feel the storm's roar fade into the distance, the immediate danger replaced by reflection. I think of heroism in every form, the rescuer who extended a hand, the families who refused to surrender, the teachers, neighbors, and ordinary citizens who became extraordinary in those hours of chaos. They are the lifeblood of New Orleans, and their courage outshines the fury of any hurricane. The streets behind us remain submerged, the debris of lives interrupted drifting silently past. And in this moment of calm, I allow myself a deep, steady breath. The storm is still raging, but I am safe. My heart pounds, not just from fear, but from admiration for those who lived and for those who acted, refusing to let the flood dictate the final story. I close my eyes briefly, the steady hum of the boat beneath me, the rain a soft percussion on the roof of the craft. I feel a profound sense of connection to this place, to its people, and to its history. The devastation has been immense, but the spirit of New Orleans endures, resilient, defiant, and enduring through every rising tide. And with that, the story of tonight's walk comes to a close. Rest easy, friends. The rabbit hole of time holds many more slow steps. Until we meet again, Silas is signing off.